Picture your grandmother's Christmas table in 1952, gleaming gelatin molds, mysterious salads.
All you do is pour some Jell-O brand gelatin into a mold and chill until it thickens.
That weren't salads, and desserts that looked like artwork. Betty Crocker convinced millions of families these were essential holiday traditions.
You know how to roll a jelly roll? It's easy if you know how. And it's just as good as it looks. Certainly is fun to work in a modern kitchen.
Then they vanished completely. Here's what kept America's Christmas tables magical for decades. Ribbon gelatin salad. What if I told you families once spent 3 days making a single salad? Picture a 1950s housewife carefully layering red and green Jell-O, waiting hours between each pour. She's creating what neighbors called stained glass magic, the ribbon gelatin salad that crowned every Christmas buffet. First came the cherry layer, dissolved in boiling water, then chilled until barely set. Next, the lime layer floated on top, followed by another cherry stripe. Some ambitious cooks added cream cheese layers, turning simple gelatin into edible architecture. The kitchen smelled like artificial fruit and anticipation. Each slice revealed perfect stripes that shimmered under dining room lights. Kids marveled at the colors, while adults debated the recipe's secrets. Candle salad. Ever wonder why your great-aunt giggled when she served candle salad? Betty Crocker marketed this as festive fun for the whole family, but mothers knew better. Children snickered at the oddly shaped candles, while fathers raised eyebrows. Still, it appeared on every holiday buffet because it was cheap, colorful, and used ingredients families already had. The assembly was simple. Slice pineapple rings, stand banana halves in the centers, crown with bright red cherries, and pipe mayonnaise down the sides. Some adventurous cooks added lettuce leaves as holly or sprinkled paprika for flame effects. This wasn't really about taste. It was about making something from nothing look special. During rationing, when sugar was scarce and meat was precious, mothers needed ways to make ordinary meals feel festive. The candle salad delivered visual impact for pennies. "Looks just like real candles," children would squeal. Plum pudding with hard sauce. Why did American families torture themselves making British plum pudding? Picture a dense, dark mixture steaming in cloth bags for 6 hours while mothers prayed it wouldn't collapse. This Victorian holdover became Betty Crocker's answer to elegant Christmas desserts during the 1940s rationing era. The pudding contained no plums, just raisins, currants, beef sweet, breadcrumbs, and enough spices to mask questionable flavors. Families mixed it weeks ahead, storing the dense loaves in cool pantries where they aged like wine. The hard sauce, butter whipped with powdered sugar and brandy, was the real prize. Steam rose from enormous pots while houses filled with mysterious aromas. Children peeked nervously at the cloth-wrapped bundles bobbing in boiling water, wondering if Christmas dinner was ruined. When finally unmolded, the pudding resembled a dark, heavy cake that could stop bullets. Cranberry ice ring punch. What made 1940s party hostesses feel like artists? Picture them arranging cranberries and orange slices in ring molds, creating frozen wreaths that floated in punch bowls like edible sculptures. The cranberry ice ring turned ordinary ginger ale into a holiday masterpiece. The process required patience. Layer cranberries in ring molds, add orange slices for color, pour water carefully to avoid air bubbles, then freeze overnight. Some adventurous hostesses added mint leaves or whole cloves, creating botanical art that doubled as beverage chiller. When guests arrived, the hostess dramatically floated her creation in sparkling punch. The ice ring bobbed like a festive life preserver, slowly releasing fruit flavors while maintaining the perfect chill. Children watched in fascination as cranberries escaped their icy prison, floating free in the golden liquid. How did you ever think of it? guests marveled, not knowing Betty Crocker's cookbook contained detailed diagrams. The real magic wasn't complexity. It was transformation. Turkey a la king in pastry shells. How did smart hostesses make holiday turkeys last a week? Picture 1960s kitchens where yesterday's carved bird transformed into today's elegant entree. Turkey a la king, served in golden pastry shells that made leftovers look like fine dining. Betty's secret was the sauce: butter, flour, cream, and turkey drippings whisked into silky perfection. Chunks of turkey meat, diced vegetables, and sometimes hard-boiled eggs floated in this creamy base. The mixture filled store-bought pastry shells or homemade puff pastry cups, turning scraps into sophisticated individual portions. Steam rose from the filled shells, while families gathered around tables that looked nothing like the night before. Children who had groaned about turkey again suddenly found the meal exciting. Popcorn ball ornaments. Why did 1930s Christmas trees smell like caramel? Picture children carefully wrapping homemade popcorn balls in colored cellophane, creating edible ornaments that doubled as holiday decorations and emergency snacks during the lean years of the Depression. The process was sticky, dangerous work, boiling sugar syrup to hard crack stage, while mothers prayed little hands stayed away from the pot. Popped corn waited in enormous bowls, while families worked quickly, drizzling hot syrup and forming perfect spheres before the mixture cooled. Burnt fingers were badges of honor, each ball wrapped in bright cellophane with ribbon ties, transforming simple corn into jewel-like ornaments. They hung on tree branches alongside glass bulbs, creating a display that was both beautiful and practical. Betty Crocker understood that Depression families needed solutions that served multiple purposes, and popcorn ball ornaments delivered beauty, nutrition, and entertainment in one sticky package. Which one of these takes you back the most? Cranberry Relish with horseradish. What made holiday tables wake up and pay attention? Picture unsuspecting dinner guests taking polite spoonfuls of innocent-looking cranberry relish, only to have their sinuses cleared by hidden horseradish that packed more punch than Christmas morning coffee. This Depression-era condiment started innocently, fresh cranberries ground with oranges and sugar, creating the familiar tart-sweet base families expected. But Betty's twist was diabolical. Grated fresh horseradish root mixed into the crimson mixture, creating a relish that looked angelic, but bit back with serious attitude. The preparation required brave cooks willing to cry over horseradish fumes that could clear entire kitchens. Mothers grated the white root while tears streamed down their faces, mixing it into cranberry pulp that hissed and bubbled with spicy oils. The finished product looked identical to regular relish, until that first shocking bite: snow pudding. How did 1930s mothers create winter magic in the middle of December? Picture them whipping lemon gelatin into impossible clouds of snow, transforming ordinary dessert into edible weather that made children believe in kitchen miracles during the darkest days of the Depression. The technique was pure showmanship. Dissolve lemon jello in hot water, then chill until slightly thickened. The critical moment came next, whipping the mixture with egg beaters until it tripled in volume, creating airy peaks that resembled fresh snowdrifts. Too early and it wouldn't hold, too late and it turned to soup. Success meant mountains of pale yellow fluff that quivered like real snow. Children pressed their faces against kitchen windows, watching mothers create blizzards in mixing bowls. The finished pudding mounded in glass dishes, light as air and tart as winter mornings. Light as fresh snow, mothers promised, spooning the ethereal dessert into children's bowls. During rationing, when eggs were precious and cream was scarce, this dessert delivered luxury without guilt. One packet of gelatin could feed 6 people a dessert that felt indulgent but cost almost nothing: Yule Log Cake. Why did American mothers suddenly become French pastry chefs every December? Picture 1950s kitchens where determined housewives attempted the impossible, rolling delicate sponge cakes into log shapes that looked like they'd fallen from Christmas trees, proving their sophistication to skeptical neighbors. Betty Crocker's Yule Log promised European elegance in suburban kitchens, but the reality was pure stress. The sponge cake had to be perfect. Too dry and it cracked when rolled, too moist and it fell apart. Mothers spread warm cakes with towels, rolling them while still hot, praying the delicate structure would hold. The filling varied: buttercream, jam, or whipped cream. But the real challenge was the bark effect. Chocolate frosting had to look like tree bark, complete with knots and rough texture. Some ambitious bakers added marzipan mushrooms or powdered sugar snow, creating edible landscapes that belonged in fairy tales, just like they make in Paris, hostesses declared, though most had never left their home states. The finished logs sat on dining room tables like centerpieces, too beautiful to cut, but too delicious to ignore. Children marveled at the spiral patterns revealed in each slice. Success brought neighborhood fame, but failure meant Christmas dessert disaster. Cracked logs were hastily disguised with extra frosting, while mothers swore they'd stick to simple cakes next year. But Betty's photos were too tempting, and the cycle repeated annually. But not all ambitious recipes required such precision. Mock mince pie. How did Depression mothers deliver Christmas tradition without Christmas budgets? Picture resourceful women grinding raisins, apples, and spices into mixtures that tasted exactly like expensive mincemeat, proving that creativity could triumph over empty wallets during America's hardest years. Traditional mince pie required costly ingredients: beef sweet, candied fruits, brandy, and beef tongue, luxuries beyond most families' reach. Betty's mock version used everyday ingredients: chopped apples, raisins, vinegar, molasses, and warming spices that created identical flavors for fraction of the cost. The kitchen filled with Christmas aromas as mothers simmered their mock mincemeat, stirring constantly to prevent sticking. Apple pieces broke down into chunky paste, while raisins plumped and spices bloomed. The mixture looked darker and more complex than its simple ingredients suggested. Families gathered around pies that tasted exactly like their grandmother's expensive versions. "Tastes just like the real thing," fathers declared, not knowing they were eating fruit instead of meat. Children devoured slices without questioning the economics behind their dessert. This wasn't compromise, it was innovation. Betty understood that holiday memories depended on familiar flavors, not expensive ingredients. Mock mince pie delivered childhood Christmas tastes to Depression-era tables, proving that tradition could survive economic hardship with clever substitutions. The recipe became so popular that many families preferred it to real mincemeat, finding the fruit-based version lighter and more digestible than the original meat mixture. But vegetables were getting fancy treatment, too. Green bean Almondine casserole. Before fried onions took over every holiday table, what made green beans special? Picture 1940s Christmas dinners where elegant green bean almondine graced tables like jewelry, fresh beans glistening with butter, crowned with slivered almonds that transformed humble vegetables into company-worthy side dishes that impressed the fussiest relatives. This wasn't the heavy cream soup casserole that dominates modern tables. Betty's original version celebrated the beans themselves. Crisp, tender spears that snapped with freshness, lightly sautéed with real butter until bright green and barely cooked. The almonds came next, toasted until golden and fragrant, scattered over the beans like edible confetti. The technique required timing and attention. Fresh green beans went into boiling salted water for exactly 3 minutes, then shocked in ice water to stop cooking and preserve their vibrant color. Meanwhile, butter melted in wide skillets, while slivered almonds toasted to perfect golden brown, filling kitchens with nutty aromas that made children hover nearby. The final assembly was pure theater. Hot beans tossed with foaming butter, topped with toasted almonds that sizzled and popped against the green backdrop. Some cooks added a splash of lemon juice or a sprinkle of fresh herbs, but the classic version needed nothing more than perfect execution. "Elegant as anything served downtown," mothers declared, presenting dishes that looked professionally prepared but cost less than a restaurant appetizer. During wartime rationing, when meat was scarce and meals felt repetitive, this simple preparation elevated ordinary vegetables into memorable side dishes. The real secret was restraint. No heavy sauces to mask the beans' natural flavor, no unnecessary additions to complicate the clean taste. Betty understood that elegance often meant editing, not adding. Green bean almondine proved that simple ingredients, perfectly prepared, could outshine the most complex casseroles. Smart hostesses made extra almonds, knowing guests would ask for seconds of the special green beans. Holly wreath cookies. What made 1960s children feel like Christmas elves? Picture suburban kitchens where mothers and kids worked together, transforming ordinary cornflakes into edible holly wreaths that decorated cookie plates and delighted relatives who couldn't believe something so cute was actually edible. The magic started with melting butter and marshmallows into golden syrup that smelled like campfires and summer picnics. Green food coloring turned the mixture into Christmas colors, while children watched the transformation with wide eyes. Then came the cornflakes. Bowl after bowl dumped into the sweet green mixture, creating crunchy leaves that stuck together with sugary glue. Working quickly before the mixture hardened, mothers and children dropped spoonfuls onto waxed paper, shaping them into wreath circles with their fingers. Little hands were perfect for this job, small enough to form delicate circles without crushing the delicate cornflake. Leaves. The finishing touch came last. Bright red cinnamon candies pressed into each wreath, creating berries that completed the holly illusion. "Pretty as real wreaths," children exclaimed, arranging their creations on platters for Christmas visitors. These weren't just cookies, they were edible decorations that made every child feel like a master baker. The combination of sweet marshmallow, crunchy cereal, and spicy cinnamon created flavors that were purely American Christmas. Wassail Bowl. Before hot chocolate ruled winter nights, what warmed American hearts during holiday gatherings? Picture enormous punch bowls steaming with wassail, a centuries-old English tradition that Betty Crocker adapted for suburban kitchens, filling homes with spiced aromas that made every guest feel like they'd stepped into a Dickens novel. This wasn't just hot cider with cinnamon sticks. Traditional wassail required careful layering of flavors, apple cider as the base, then ale or sherry for depth, sugar for sweetness, and a complex spice mixture that included whole cloves, allspice berries, cinnamon bark, and fresh ginger. Some recipes called for roasted apples studded with cloves, floating like aromatic islands in the amber liquid. The preparation became a holiday ritual. Mothers started early in the day, simmering spices until the kitchen smelled like Christmas markets. The alcohol addition required careful timing. Too early, and it cooked away. Too late, and it didn't blend properly. Smart hostesses kept the mixture warm on stovebacks, ladling it into heat-proof glasses as guests arrived. "Warms you to your bones," fathers declared, nursing steaming cups while snow fell outside kitchen windows. The drink served multiple purposes. It was greeting, entertainment, and comfort, all in one fragrant package. Children received alcohol-free versions that tasted just as magical without the adult additions. Wassail bowls became centerpieces at holiday parties, surrounded by ladles and heat-proof glasses. The drink encouraged lingering. Guests stayed longer when their cups were constantly refilled with warming liquid that improved as the evening progressed. Smart hostesses floated orange slices or cinnamon sticks for visual appeal. Betty understood that Americans craved old-world traditions, especially during the post-war years when families sought connection to their European roots. Cranberry upside-down cake. Why did pineapple get all the upside-down cake fame when cranberries were doing it first? Picture 1940s holiday kitchens where resourceful mothers discovered that tart cranberries, when caramelized with brown sugar and butter, created stunning ruby-red crowns for simple yellow cakes that outshone any tropical competitor. The batter settled around individual cranberries, creating a cake that would reveal jewel-like surprises when inverted. Baking filled homes with aromas that combined tart fruit with rich caramel. The dramatic moment came after cooling, flipping the cake onto serving plates to reveal the glistening cranberry crown. Each slice showcased the fruit's natural beauty, with individual berries suspended in golden cake like stained glass windows. The combination of tart cranberries and sweet cake created perfect balance. "Prettier than any bakery cake," hostesses declared, serving desserts that looked professionally decorated but used ingredients from their own pantries. During rationing, when exotic fruits were impossible to find, cranberries provided local alternatives that tasted better than imported pineapple. The cake improved with age, as cranberry juices soaked into the surrounding cake, creating complex flavors that developed overnight. Smart bakers made their cakes a day ahead, allowing time for the fruit and cake to marry into something greater than either component alone. Betty's recipe included helpful tips: pricking cranberries to prevent bursting, adjusting sugar based on fruit tartness, and timing the flip when the cake was cool enough to handle but warm enough to release cleanly. These details separated successful cakes from sticky disasters. Each adaptation proved that upside-down cakes were canvases for creativity, not rigid formulas. But sometimes convenience foods created the most surprising results. Tomato soup spice cake. What made unsuspecting guests gasp when they learned the secret ingredient? Picture dinner party hosts watching faces change from confusion to amazement as they revealed their moist, perfectly spiced cake contained an entire can of Campbell's tomato soup, proving that Depression-era creativity could transform pantry staples into dessert magic. Betty Crocker's most shocking recipe started with ingredients that seemed incompatible: condensed tomato soup, flour, sugar, and warm spices. The soup provided moisture and subtle acidity that enhanced the spices, creating cake that tasted like sophisticated gingerbread without requiring exotic ingredients or expensive butter. The mixing process confused first-time bakers. Cream soup with sugar until smooth, add eggs and vanilla, then alternate flour mixture with water. The batter looked alarmingly orange, prompting second thoughts about serving soup-flavored dessert to company. But the oven worked its magic, transforming the questionable mixture into golden cake layers. The finished cake revealed no tomato flavor. Instead, it delivered complex spice notes with exceptional moisture that lasted for days. Cream cheese frosting was traditional, but some bakers preferred simple dusting with powdered sugar. Either way, guests devoured slices while trying to identify the mysterious ingredient that made the cake so special. "I'd never have guessed," visitors marveled, reaching for second portions while hosts revealed their secret. The recipe became conversation starter at potluck dinners and church socials, where competitive bakers sought new ways to surprise their communities. A can of soup, some flour, and basic spices created dessert that rivaled butter-rich pound cakes. Smart homemakers stockpiled soup cans, knowing they could create impressive desserts whenever company arrived unexpectedly. Each variation created unique flavor profiles while maintaining the soup's moisture-providing properties. Betty understood that Americans needed recipes that worked with available ingredients, not idealized pantries. But gelatin was reaching new heights of absurdity. Turkey mousse mold. What made 1960s dinner guests question their hostess's sanity? Picture elegant gelatine molds containing pureed leftover turkey suspended in pink gelatin, transforming yesterday's Christmas dinner into today's conversation piece that nobody quite knew how to eat, but everyone felt obligated to compliment. This wasn't simple leftover management, it was architectural ambition. Leftover turkey got ground fine in meat grinders, then mixed with mayonnaise, cream, and seasonings until smooth as pâté. Unflavored gelatin dissolved in turkey broth provided structure, while a few drops of red food coloring created the signature pink hue that made everything look vaguely medical. The assembly required engineering skills. Layer ground turkey mixture with plain gelatin in decorative molds, creating marbled effects that looked intentional rather than accidental. Some ambitious hostesses added hard-boiled egg slices or pickle pieces for color contrast, creating cross-sections that resembled geological surveys more than food. "So elegant," guests murmured politely, taking small portions while privately planning to fill up on bread and butter. The texture challenged expectations, smooth where turkey should be chunky, cold where it should be warm, pink where it should be brown. Children stared in fascination while adults searched for appropriate compliments. But bread could be decorative, too. Snowflake Rolls. How did ordinary dinner rolls become winter wonderlands? Picture 1950s bakers wielding sharp scissors over risen dough, creating intricate cuts that transformed simple bread into edible snowflakes that made every breadbasket look like it had been touched by Jack Frost himself. The technique started with basic sweet roll dough. Flour, yeast, sugar, butter, and eggs mixed into smooth, elastic consistency. But the magic happened during shaping, when bakers rolled portions into circles, then used kitchen scissors to cut intricate patterns that would bloom during baking. Each cut had to be precise. Too shallow, and the pattern wouldn't open. Too deep, and the dough would tear apart. The cutting patterns required artistic vision. Traditional snowflakes used six-point symmetry, with cuts radiating from the center like frozen fractals. Advanced bakers created multiple layers of cuts, building complexity that would reveal itself only after baking. Some added different patterns to each roll, creating breadbasket variety that impressed even fussy relatives. The oven heat opened each cut, causing the dough to expand into lacy patterns that resembled actual snowflakes. The sugar coating added sweetness and visual sparkle that caught dining room light. "Beautiful as real snow," children exclaimed, examining each roll's unique pattern before reluctantly eating them. No two snowflake rolls were identical, making each dinner guest feel special. The slight sweetness made them perfect for holiday meals, bridging the gap between bread and dessert. Smart bakers made extra rolls, knowing guests would request the recipes after seeing the spectacular results. Some ambitious hostesses used the rolls as centerpiece elements, arranging them on tiered stands or around candles to create winter tableaux. The rolls stayed fresh longer than expected, making them practical choices for busy holiday schedules when timing was everything. But candles weren't just for decoration anymore. Cranberry candle mold. And just when you thought we'd seen it all, what made 1940s hostesses feel like magicians? Picture them creating actual edible candles, cranberry gelatin molded into perfect candle shapes, complete with white wax drippings and flickering flames that fooled guests until that first shocking bite revealed the sweet tart truth. This wasn't just ambitious, it was borderline insane. The technique required specialty candle-shaped molds, usually borrowed from actual candle-making supplies. Fresh cranberries were cooked until they burst, releasing their ruby juices into sweetened water. Unflavored gelatin provided structure while the cranberry liquid created that authentic waxy appearance that made the finished product look genuinely combustible. The real artistry came in the layering. First, clear gelatin created the dripping wax effect, poured while warm enough to flow, but cool enough not to melt previous layers. The cranberry mixture went in next, creating the main candle body with its deep red color that looked exactly like expensive taper candles. The wick had to be inserted while the gelatin was still soft, but firm enough to support the addition. Getting it perfectly centered required the patience of a saint and the hands of a surgeon, but the real showstopper was the flame. Yellow gelatin, carefully spooned over the wick tip while guests weren't looking, created flickering flame effects that made people reach for water glasses before realizing they were looking at food, not fire. "Good gracious, they look real!" guests gasped, reaching cautiously toward centerpieces that seemed too dangerous to touch. Children stared in confusion, while adults debated whether the candles were food or decoration. The hostess would finally reveal the truth by taking the first bite, proving her candles were dessert, not lighting. Betty's recipe included troubleshooting tips for common problems, preventing air bubbles, achieving proper gel consistency, timing the layering process. The instructions read more like chemistry textbook than cookbook, reflecting the technical precision required for success. Some hostesses made entire candelabras of edible candles, creating table displays that looked like formal dining rooms until dessert time revealed the edible truth. The cranberry flavor was actually quite good, tart enough to balance the sweetness, firm enough to hold intricate shapes. Luxury ingredients were making a comeback. Oysters, Rockefeller casserole. When post-war prosperity returned, how did families celebrate their new affluence? Picture 1950s dinner parties where hostesses served oysters Rockefeller casserole, transforming the luxurious restaurant appetizer into a shareable casserole that announced to everyone within smelling distance that rationing was definitely over and good times were here again. This wasn't the delicate individual oyster preparation served in fancy restaurants. It was democracy in action, making expensive tastes accessible to suburban dinner tables. Fresh oysters, still dripping with briny liquor, nestled in buttered casserole dishes alongside chopped spinach, green onions, and enough butter to make cardiologists weep. The original Rockefeller topping, breadcrumbs, herbs, and more butter, crowned the whole production. The preparation felt like conducting an orchestra of luxury ingredients. Spinach had to be cooked, drained, and chopped fine enough to coat each oyster without overwhelming its delicate flavor. Fresh herbs, parsley, chives, sometimes tarragon, got minced into fragrant confetti. Breadcrumbs toasted in butter until golden, creating the crunchy topping that would crown the finished dish. Assembly required confidence and speed. Oysters arranged in single layers, topped with seasoned spinach mixture, then blanketed with herb butter breadcrumbs. Into hot ovens they went, bubbling and browning until the tops turned golden and the edges sizzled with promise. The aroma filled dining rooms with sophisticated scents that announced serious entertaining was happening. "Rich as Rockefeller himself," hosts declared, serving portions that cost more per bite than most families spent on entire meals just years earlier. This wasn't just food. It was prosperity made edible, proof that American families had not only survived the Depression and war, but emerged ready to embrace luxury with both hands. The casserole format made expensive oysters stretch further while maintaining their special occasion feel. 1 pint of oysters could serve 8 people when properly extended with vegetables and seasonings. Smart hostesses served small portions alongside other dishes, making the oysters feel like elegant additions rather than main courses. Divinity Candy, what drove 1950s grandmothers to check barometers before making candy. Picture determined women consulting weather reports and humidity gauges before attempting divinity. the temperamental confection that refused to set on rainy days, turning experienced candy makers into meteorologists who scheduled their kitchen sessions around atmospheric pressure. Divinity was pure kitchen chemistry, hot sugar syrup, beaten into stiff egg whites until the mixture formed clouds of edible meringue. But success depended entirely on weather conditions. High humidity meant failure, regardless of technique or experience. Smart candy makers waited for dry, crisp days when the air cooperated with their ambitious plans. The process required military precision and circus performer timing. Sugar syrup had to reach exactly 260 degrees, the hardball stage, while egg whites whipped to perfect peaks in separate bowls. The critical moment came when the scalding syrup met the whites, transforming liquid sugar into billowing clouds that resembled cotton candy but tasted like heaven. Beat until it holds its shape, recipes instructed, but experienced makers knew the real test. When dropped from spoons, perfect divinity formed peaks that didn't collapse. Too little beating and it stayed sticky. Too much and it turned grainy. The window for success lasted maybe 5 minutes before the mixture either set perfectly or became expensive mistakes. Successful batches created candy that lived up to its heavenly name, light, airy, sweet clouds that dissolved on tongues while leaving traces of vanilla and almonds. Some bakers added chopped nuts or candied fruits, creating jeweled versions that looked like edible Christmas ornaments. The finished candy held its shape for weeks when stored properly, but failure was spectacular and expensive. Humid day attempts resulted in sticky messes that never firmed, remaining gooey disasters that had to be scraped into garbage cans. Overbeaten mixtures turned granular and dry, resembling chalk more than candy. These failures taught hard lessons about respecting weather conditions. "My grandmothers never failed," every cook claimed, though their own attempts often proved otherwise. Divinity separated the true candy makers from the wannabes, creating neighborhood hierarchies based on confectionery skills. Women who consistently produced perfect batches gained reputations that lasted decades. Betty's recipe included detailed weather warnings and troubleshooting guides, acknowledging that Divinity challenged even experienced bakers. The instructions read like science textbook: exact temperatures, precise timing, environmental requirements that had to be met for success. Some families made Divinity their Christmas tradition, gathering multiple generations in kitchens where grandmothers passed down techniques that couldn't be learned from cookbooks. The candy making became as important as the candy itself, creating memories that lasted longer than the sweets. Ribbon sandwich loaf. What made 1950s party guests do double takes at the buffet table? Picture hostesses proudly presenting what appeared to be elegant layer cakes, complete with smooth white frosting and decorative touches, only to watch faces change from anticipation to confusion as the first slice revealed layers of chicken salad, ham spread, and egg salad instead of chocolate and vanilla. The ribbon sandwich loaf was pure theater, multiple layers of different colored sandwich fillings stacked between bread slices, then frosted with softened cream cheese that disguised the entire creation as dessert. From across the room, guests saw beautiful white cake. Up close, they discovered lunch masquerading as pastry, proving that 1950s hostesses would go to any length to surprise their guests. Construction required architectural planning and artistic vision. White bread, crusts removed, formed the foundation layers. Between each slice went different colored fillings: pink ham salad, yellow egg salad, green olive cream cheese mixture, or orange salmon spread. The goal was creating distinct colored stripes that would show dramatically when sliced, like edible geology lessons. The frosting was actually softened cream cheese beaten with mayonnaise until smooth enough to spread like buttercream. Experienced hostesses tinted portions with food coloring, creating decorative roses and borders that enhanced the cake illusion. Some added paprika dustings or olive garnishes, but the best versions looked completely convincing until that first revealing cut. "Is that really cake?" guests asked, examining slices that revealed rainbow layers of savory fillings. Children were particularly confused, expecting sweet cake, but discovering sandwich flavors that challenged their dessert expectations. The texture was definitely sandwich, but the presentation screamed celebration cake. Sugarplums. Did your family ever wonder what visions of sugarplums actually meant? Picture Victorian-era confectioners rolling spiced dried fruits into jewel-like balls, creating the literal inspiration for Clement Moore's famous Christmas poem. Real sugarplums that Betty Crocker revived for 1940s families, seeking authentic holiday traditions that connected them to Christmas past. These weren't plums at all, despite the name. Traditional sugarplums were dried fruits, apricots, dates, figs, raisins, ground fine and mixed with warming spices, then rolled into marble-sized balls and coated with granulated sugar. The plum in the name referred to any dried fruit, not specifically the purple variety we know today. The preparation was meditation disguised as cooking. Dried fruits soaked until soft, then passed through meat grinders until they formed smooth, fragrant paste. Cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and sometimes ginger joined the mixture, creating complex spice blends that filled kitchens with Christmas market aromas. Some recipes included chopped almonds or walnuts for texture contrast. Rolling the mixture into perfect spheres required patience and slightly damp hands to prevent sticking. Each ball then rolled in granulated sugar, creating crystalline coatings that sparkled like tiny Christmas ornaments. The finished sugar plums were arranged on waxed paper to dry, transforming into gems that looked too precious to eat, just like the poem promised, mothers told children who examined the candies with wonder, finally understanding what danced in their heads during Christmas dreams. The sugar plums delivered intense fruit flavors concentrated into bite-sized portions, proving that centuries-old recipes could still delight modern palates. The candies improved with age, as flavors melded and textures firmed into perfect consistency. Churches included sugarplums in Christmas pageants, using them as props that children could actually eat after performances. Sunday school teachers explained the historical connections, helping young people understand that their favorite Christmas poem described real foods their ancestors enjoyed. Different regions developed signature variations. Southern versions included bourbon, while northern recipes preferred brandy. West Coast cooks added local dried fruits, creating regional specialties that reflected available ingredients. Each variation maintained the essential character while expressing local tastes, but some pies required no baking at all. Cranberry Velvet Pie. How did busy 1950s hostesses create impressive desserts without turning on their ovens? Picture them discovering the magic of Cranberry Velvet Pie, a no-bake wonder that transformed fresh cranberries and marshmallows into silk-smooth filling that looked like professional pastry shop creation, but required nothing more than patience and a reliable refrigerator. The technique was pure chemistry disguised as simple cooking. Fresh cranberries cooked with sugar until they burst into ruby-red sauce, releasing natural pectin that would later help set the filling. Meanwhile, marshmallows melted into the hot cranberry mixture, creating sweet, fluffy base that balanced the fruit's natural tartness. The combination seemed impossible. How could marshmallows and cranberries create sophisticated dessert? The real magic happened during cooling. As the cranberry marshmallow mixture chilled, it transformed from soupy liquid into velvet smooth filling that held its shape when cut, but melted perfectly on tongues. Some recipes called for folding in whipped cream, creating even lighter texture that resembled resembled expensive French mousse. Assembly was almost embarrassingly simple. Graham cracker crusts, either homemade or store-bought, held the jewel-toned filling that looked far more complex than its humble ingredients suggested. The pie chilled overnight, allowing flavors to meld and texture to perfect itself without any additional effort from the baker. Smooth as velvet, guests marveled, taking second slices of pie that delivered restaurant-quality results from kitchen-table techniques. The cranberry flavor was intense but balanced, tart enough to feel sophisticated but sweet enough to satisfy dessert expectations. Each bite dissolved into creamy perfection that left people guessing about preparation methods. The recipe rescued many holiday meals when ovens were occupied with turkeys and casseroles. Smart hostesses could prepare their desserts days ahead, freeing oven space for dishes that required last-minute attention. The pie actually improved with time as flavors developed and textures achieved perfect consistency. Betty understood that modern hostesses needed shortcuts that didn't compromise quality. Cranberry Velvet Pie delivered elegant results using techniques that saved time and energy while creating desserts that impressed even critical relatives. The marshmallow addition was genius, providing sweetness, texture, and binding properties in single ingredient. Some bakers experimented with different cranberry preparations, whole berry sauce for texture, strained sauce for smoothness, or combinations that provided both. Each variation created different eating experiences while maintaining the essential character that made the pie memorable. Turkey, cranberry mold. What happened when 1960s hostesses decided leftover turkey needed artistic presentation? Picture them layering chunks of yesterday's Christmas dinner with cranberry gelatin, creating architectural monuments to thrift that impressed guests with their creativity, while secretly horrifying them with combinations that challenged every notion of proper food pairing. This wasn't simple leftover management. It was sculpture that happened to be edible. The technique required engineering skills and artistic vision. Clear cranberry gelatin formed the base layer, followed by carefully arranged turkey pieces that created patterns visible through transparent sides. More gelatin layers secured everything in place, building towers of protein and fruit that defied conventional wisdom about what belonged together on dinner plates. The preparation demanded patience and precise timing. Gelatin had to be partially set before adding turkey layers. Too liquid, and the meat sank to the bottom. Too firm, and new layers wouldn't bond properly. Each addition required careful planning to create visual interest when the mold was finally revealed. Some ambitious hostesses added hard-boiled eggs or vegetables, creating cross-sections that resembled geological surveys. Color coordination was accidental art. The ruby-red cranberry gelatin provided dramatic backdrop, pale turkey meat, creating contrast that looked intentional even when results were purely random. Orange carrots or green peas added more colors to molds that resembled abstract paintings more than traditional food presentations. So clever, guests murmured politely, examining slices that challenged their expectations about proper food combinations. The cranberry flavor dominated, making the turkey taste like fruity afterthought rather than protein main course. Children stared in fascination, while adults searched for diplomatic compliments. Unmolding provided the real drama. Would the architectural creation hold together or collapse into expensive disaster? Successful molds quivered on platters, maintaining their structural integrity while guests wondered whether they were supposed to eat or admire the creation. The gelatin's firmness determined everything. Too soft, and it collapsed. Too hard, and it tasted like rubber. Betty promoted these molds as elegant solutions for holiday entertaining, perfect for buffet tables where visual impact mattered more than traditional flavor combinations. The recipes appeared alongside photographs of perfectly dressed hostesses serving perfectly shaped molds to perfectly polite guests who were obviously better actors than most people's actual relatives. The real audience was competitive suburban hostesses seeking ways to distinguish their entertaining from boring neighbors who simply served leftover turkey sandwiches. Turkey cranberry molds delivered shock value and conversation topics that lasted longer than the food itself, ensuring party guests guests would remember the meal even if they couldn't quite remember enjoying it. Peanut brittle. What made Depression-era families risk their dental work for homemade candy? Picture kitchen scenes where mothers wielded candy thermometers like weapons, creating peanut brittle so hard it could crack teeth, but so irresistibly delicious that families risked their molars for sheets of golden candy that proved luxury could be created from humble peanuts and pure determination. This wasn't gentle candy for delicate eaters. Traditional peanut brittle reached hard crack stage, 300 degrees of molten sugar that could cause serious burns and definitely required respect. The technique was unforgiving. Boil sugar and corn syrup to precise temperature, add peanuts at exactly the right moment, then pour onto buttered sheets where it cooled into amber glass that shattered like crystalline perfection. The timing was everything and brooked no delays. Sugar mixture bubbled violently in heavy pans while mothers stirred constantly to prevent burning. The temperature climbed steadily, 240 degrees for soft ball, 250 for firm ball, 300 for the hard crack that created proper brittle. Adding peanuts too early meant soft candy. Too late meant burnt sugar disaster. Pour required courage and speed. Molten candy, hot enough to cause third-degree burns, spread across buttered cookie sheets in thin layers that would cool into edible stained glass. Working quickly before the mixture hardened, experienced candy makers stretched it paper thin, creating delicate sheets that would snap cleanly when broken. Hard as rocks, but sweet as heaven, children declared, examining pieces of brittle that challenged their developing teeth but delivered intense peanut and caramel flavors that made the risk worthwhile. Smart families broke it into manageable pieces, creating portions that could be eaten safely without requiring emergency dental appointment. The candy represented Depression-era ingenuity at its finest, transforming inexpensive peanuts into luxury treats that looked and tasted expensive. A few pounds of peanuts and some sugar created gifts worthy of special occasions, proving that skill could substitute for costly ingredients when money was tight. Storage required airtight containers and constant vigilance against humidity, which could turn crisp brittle into chewy disappointment overnight. Smart candy makers timed their production for dry weather, understanding that atmospheric conditions affected results as much as technique or ingredients. Butter Brickle ice cream pie. What made 1950s hostesses feel like professional pastry chefs? Picture them crushing English toffee bars into golden fragments, folding them into vanilla ice cream, then pressing the mixture into graham cracker crusts to create Butter Brickle ice cream pie. Frozen elegance that looked like restaurant dessert but assembled in home kitchens using store-bought shortcuts. The technique was deceptively simple but required perfect timing and temperature control. Heath bars, or homemade butter brickle candy, went into heavy bags, then received therapeutic beatings with rolling pins until they became crunchy fragments. Holiday presentation was natural. The golden butterscotch color looked festive in any setting, whether family dinners or formal parties. The pies photographed beautifully, making them popular choices for entertaining where visual impact mattered as much as flavor. Churches included the recipe in fundraising cookbooks, recognizing that volunteers needed desserts that could be prepared well ahead of event. The pie's reliability and crowd-pleasing flavors made it perfect for potluck dinners, where success was measured by empty plates. Chestnut dressing. Before stovetop dominated American tables, what made holiday stuffing truly special? Picture families gathering around kitchen tables, carefully peeling roasted chestnuts, while mothers prepared the most elegant dressing imaginable. Chestnut dressing that transformed ordinary bread stuffing into something worthy of European holiday traditions, proving that American ingenuity could elevate any dish to sophistication. The preparation began with chestnuts themselves, fresh nuts that required careful scoring with sharp knives before roasting. Each chestnut needed an X-shaped cut to prevent explosive disasters in hot ovens. The roasting process filled homes with nutty aromas that announced serious cooking was happening, while families gathered to peel the hot nuts, burning fingers but creating memories that lasted decades. Properly roasted chestnuts revealed sweet, starchy meat that crumbled beautifully into breadcrumb mixtures. The nuts provided richness and subtle sweetness that elevated ordinary sage dressing into something approaching luxury. Combined with day-old bread, celery, onions, and traditional herbs, chestnuts created stuffing that impressed even the most critical relatives. The cooking technique required understanding chestnuts' unique properties. Unlike other nuts, chestnuts contained enough starch to help bind dressing while providing creamy texture that complemented rather than competed with other ingredients. The nuts broke down slightly during cooking, creating pockets of rich flavor throughout the finished dish. "Elegant as anything served in fine restaurants," hostesses declared, presenting dressing that looked familiar but tasted extraordinary. Guests tried to identify the mysterious ingredient that made ordinary stuffing so special, often failing to recognize the subtle chestnut flavors that had been perfectly integrated into traditional preparations. The recipe represented peak sophistication for American holiday tables. During the post-war prosperity years, families sought ways to demonstrate their refined tastes, and chestnut dressing delivered European elegance using ingredients that were expensive but not impossible to obtain. The nuts cost more than regular additions, but the results justified the investment. Betty's instructions included detailed guidance for chestnut preparation, proper scoring techniques, roasting temperatures, and peeling methods that minimized waste while maximizing flavor extraction. The chestnuts required advanced preparation, making this dressing unsuitable for last-minute holiday cooking, but perfect for planned entertaining. Regional availability affected the recipe's popularity. Urban areas with specialty food stores could obtain fresh chestnuts reliably, while rural families sometimes substituted other nuts or simply admired the recipe from afar. This scarcity added to the dressing's appeal. Not everyone could make it, which made it more special when served. Holiday molded relish. Tray, what transformed ordinary vegetables into edible Christmas ornaments? Picture 1950s hostesses suspending garden vegetables in shimmering red and green gelatin, creating holiday-molded relish trays that looked like stained glass windows but tasted like someone had imprisoned perfectly good vegetables in sweet, jiggly prisons that confused every notion of proper food presentation. This wasn't simple relish. It was architectural ambition disguised as side dish. Multiple colors of gelatin created layered landscapes where carrot coins, celery crescents, and radish roses floated like vegetables trapped in amber. The visual impact was undeniable, but the taste combinations challenged guests who expected savory vegetables to behave like vegetables, not dessert components. The construction required engineering skills and artistic vision. Clear gelatin layers alternated with vegetable arrangements, building towers of food that resembled geological specimens more than traditional relish. Each layer needed perfect timing, too hot, and it melted previous layers. Too cool and new additions wouldn't bond properly. Bourbon Balls, what kept Southern grandmothers smiling through December holiday preparations. Picture them creating bourbon balls, no-bake confections that grew stronger with age, combining crushed vanilla wafers, powdered sugar, cocoa, and enough Kentucky bourbon to make Christmas preparations significantly more enjoyable for the baker. Bourbon balls contained enough alcohol to make grown-ups reconsider driving after church socials, packed into bite-sized portions that looked innocent but delivered serious adult flavor. The recipe was simplicity itself. Crush vanilla wafers fine, mix with powdered sugar and cocoa, then add bourbon until the mixture held together. The preparation was therapeutic for harried holiday hostesses. Crushing wafers by hand provided excellent stress relief, while the bourbon addition made kitchen work more pleasant. Smart bakers sampled frequently during preparation, ensuring proper flavor balance while gradually improving their holiday mood. "Just one more," guests would declare, not realizing they were consuming increasingly substantial amounts of bourbon in candy form. The alcohol didn't cook away. It concentrated as the candies aged, creating confections that packed more punch after weeks of storage. The aging process was essential. Snowflake Fudge. How did 1960s mothers create edible winter wonderlands in their own kitchens? Picture them carefully crafting white chocolate fudge, then using delicate snowflake cookie cutters to transform simple candy into crystalline perfection that looked like it had fallen from heaven directly onto Christmas cookie plates. This wasn't ordinary fudge. It was winter artistry disguised as confection. White chocolate provided the snowy base, melted carefully to avoid the scorching that could ruin entire batches. The technique required patience and constant attention, stirring over double boilers while praying the chocolate wouldn't seize into grainy disasters. The pouring and cooling process demanded precision timing. Too hot and the fudge wouldn't set properly. Too cool and it became too thick to pour smoothly. The mixture had to reach perfect consistency, fluid enough to level itself, but thick enough to hold clean edges when cut. But the real magic happened during cutting. Snowflake cookie cutters, pressed into perfectly set fudge, created intricate patterns that mimicked nature's frozen artistry. Each cut had to be clean and decisive. Hesitation created ragged edges that destroyed the illusion. "Beautiful as real snowflakes," children exclaimed.